An old man stares at his empty living room, clutching a suitcase. He sold everything for the woman he loved online. But she was never real. What he discovers next will break your heart. Harold Whitmore, 71, had spent most of his life alone after his wife passed away 2 decades ago. A quiet man from a small English village, Harold filled his days with gardening, tea, and memories. But nights were lonelier, and that loneliness pushed him onto the internet, where he discovered a dating forum for seniors. That's where he met Isabella, a vibrant, kind-hearted 58-year-old woman who claimed to live in Portugal. She loved literature, classical music, and even shared Harold's fondness for antique clocks. Over weeks, they exchanged emails, photos, and late-night video calls, though her camera was always broken. Still, Harold felt he had found someone to share his remaining years with. Their bond deepened. Harold began to write poetry again, something he hadn't done since his youth. He sent her letters, gifts, and shared details of his quiet life. Isabella, in turn, told him about her difficult situation. A recent cancer diagnosis, her need to move away from her abusive landlord, and mounting medical bills. She never asked directly, but Harold offered help. He sent her money. First, a small amount, then more, then thousands. Each time she promised they'd finally meet, that she would come to him, or he would come to her. But always, something went wrong. One day, Isabella told him she had found a perfect cottage by the sea in Portugal where they could live together. All they needed was enough money to secure it. Without hesitation, Harold listed his own home for sale. Friends and neighbors tried to warn him. "You've never even met her," they said. But Harold had heard the laughter in her typed words, felt her presence in his dreams. He believed in her. He believed love had finally returned to him. The house sold within 2 weeks. Harold packed his bags, holding a printed ticket she said she'd booked for him. He was to meet her at Lisbon Airport. He smiled through tears as the cab pulled up, waving goodbye to the only home he'd ever known. But when he arrived at the airport, no one was waiting. No calls, no messages. Her number, disconnected. Her email, gone. Her profile, deleted. Confused and disoriented, Harold sat for hours by the arrival's gate, until a security guard finally asked if he needed help. Harold was taken to a local police station where officers gently explained he had likely been scammed. It wasn't the first time they'd seen this. Isabella was likely not one person, but a team. A group of professional fraudsters preying on lonely seniors. They used stolen photos and scripts to build fake personas. Harold stared at the wall in silence. His heart broke, not just from losing his home, but from losing something even more sacred. His trust. For weeks, Harold lived in a cheap hostel near the airport, unable to afford a flight home. He kept hoping irrationally that she'd message him, that this was all some tragic mistake. One night, he opened his inbox and typed one last email. "I forgive you. I hope you find peace." Then he closed his laptop and cried himself to sleep. The next morning, he went to the British Embassy for help. They assisted him in returning to England, but not to the life he once had. That life had vanished. Back in England, Harold moved into a government-assisted flat. It was small and cold, the walls bare and lifeless. The neighbors were kind, but Harold rarely spoke. Every item in his new space reminded him of what he had given up for someone who never existed. He stopped writing. He stopped smiling. But one day, a knock came at the door. It was a university student named Ellie, volunteering with a local group that checked in on elderly residents. She brought groceries, books, and conversation. Ellie became a regular visitor. She didn't ask much at first, just sat and listened. One day, Harold told her everything from the emails to the flight, to the loss. He expected her to judge him, maybe even laugh, but she didn't. She simply held his hand and said, "You still have a heart big enough to believe in love. That's something no one can scam away." Her words brought tears back to Harold's eyes, this time not from pain, but from the faint flicker of healing. With Ellie's help, Harold began to write again. Not for Isabella, but for himself. He wrote poems about heartbreak, hope, and starting over. His work caught the eye of a local magazine editor who published one of his pieces. Soon, Harold was invited to share his story at senior centers and schools, warning others about online scams but also reminding them that compassion, even when betrayed, is still worth having. His pain became purpose. Years later, Harold sat on a park bench reading one of his poems aloud to a small crowd of students. His voice was old but steady, his words filled with both sorrow and strength. He never found romantic love again, but he found something deeper: dignity, self-worth, and unexpected friendships. As the wind brushed his silver hair, Harold smiled not because he forgot the pain, but because he had survived it. And in his survival, he had become someone others could believe in. They stole his money, his home, and his hope, but they could never steal his soul.